And we have to have spaces that we share darker thoughts with. And a society where we're lonely, we have to say it out loud. And then we go, well, that's mean.
This is Good One. I'm Jesse David Fox, senior writer at Vulture and author of Comedy Book. My guest today is Gianmarco Soresi. We talk about how comedians build their audience nowadays, and specifically we discuss finding the line for dark, possibly offensive jokes with a young audience made largely online. We also debate the merit of crowd work clips, revealing exactly how much it costs to make them each month. It is more than you'd think. So here is Gianmarco Soresi. I'm here with Gianmarco Soresi. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Nice seeing you. So what is the funniest thing that happened to you this week?
I went to a Lady Gaga concert, and it was like we had good seats because I paid for them, but my agency, like, it was part of their section. And of course, I should have expected that not everyone in the agency section of all of the agencies, I'm sure, are going to be like cool.
Sure.
And I was with my girlfriend, but I was in like a crop top. I was leaning into like the event to feel that. And there was like an older man next to me in his like 60s. And he was filming the whole show, but clearly he had heard about Lady Gaga today. Today is when he found out. And he was with his wife, but he just started talking to us. And every time we would film, a little bit of Lady Gaga, he'd go, no, film the screen. It's way higher quality. And he kept saying that every single time. And it felt like I wanted to say to him, like, I already have a stepdad. Yeah. Like, we don't need to. And just when I talked to my son, I was no longer in my crop top with the Lady Gaga fan. I was a 37-year-old man. Mm-hmm. And at some point, there was like smoke effect, and he turned to us and he said, well, someone left the popcorn maker on, and we you know what? And then we gave him that laugh. Mm-hmm. He saw that the joke worked. I watched him turn to his wife and repeat the joke. And I said, I think all the time about the open mics we have in life.
Yeah.
That, when do we bring it to the dinner? When you're in a relationship too, you watch your partner's process. Mm-hmm. And I said, we gave him false information. And this is how like older guys think that they're funny, because everyone keeps laughing at them merely so they can stop speaking to them. Yeah. And then they go, I've been killing on the road. Why doesn't my wife? And I said I contributed to that. Society creates the comedians that we have through reinforcement. And in that moment, I was a bad member of society.
They're so beautiful. I can perfectly imagine him getting the confidence and then being like, someone.
And the fact that he was saving it for his wife. Yeah. I mean, maybe he's a great husband. He goes, I'm testing this all. His wife is never getting the new material show. It's just poor strangers to his left.
So I want to talk about your special, but I'm going to start by giving you a compliment. Ready?
Please.
Yeah, I thought you were waiting for years. I know. So, but we're going to have to back up a little bit and talk about Matt Rife.
Okay, sure.
So the story goes, Matt Rife built a large fan base online, larger through crowd work clips. And this fan base was predominantly female. Mm-hmm. He uses this large female audience to get a Netflix special. And then he opens this Netflix special with a joke about domestic violence, a fairly hack joke about domestic violence, that caused quite a controversy. And I remember Anthony Jeselnik on his podcast was talking about that controversy. And he was like, he used a certain fan base, and then when given a platform, he then threw them under the bus for who he thought a stand-up audience should be, what a comedian's audience should be like. And he was probably too insecure to accept having a female audience, meaning he was probably too insecure to believe that he can have a female audience and be a real comedian.
Yeah.
And I bring this up because you would not do that. My perception of you is you would not throw your audience under the bus. You do not have a perception of what a real audience is. And you, I think, quite admirably want to work with your audience to help expand what they understand comedy can be. Mm-hmm. And that is the compliment I give you. I admire it quite a bit, because I think a lot of comedians have whatever reason. They're like, oh, a comedy audience is like this. And I think also like, I want to do jokes that appeal to only that audience.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't do that. So I'm curious, as a way of talking about you, what was your perception of this sort of Matt Rife trajectory?
And as a comedian, I think sometimes all the conversations get about like the artistic choice or what was his thinking, and I can't help but like scream at the top of my lungs, this is a bad joke.
Yeah.
And so like I don't know what his process was. I don't know what it was to like. I need a strong opener. Openers are notoriously tough. But at the end of the day, I just go, this was not even a deep joke. This was a joke that a black eye joke is something you would tell in middle school. And, you know, the same way that if Justin Hook opened up with a what's worse, 10 dead babies or one dead baby and 10 dumpsters, it'd be like, okay, it's not that it was a dead baby joke. It's that was a bad. If Matt Rife opened with the most brilliant domestic abuse joke of all time, whatever that is,
Sure.
I'd be there going, hey, you got to admit, though, that was a really good joke.
Yeah.
It's got to be, I think social media, the building of your fan base is so different than it used to be. And it's so curated and it's so the algorithmically defined. And, you know, I've never spoken to him about how he feels about his fan base. But I imagine that with social media, a lot of times you just wake up with a fan base and you go, wow, it's really in one particular area. And did the trajectory of the work and the work that you chose to put out bring in the diversity of that you would want in an audience if you want it?
Yeah.
And it's quite a new burden to not only make the art, but also back in the day, it would be like you'd make the good art, and frankly, you guys would determine kind of who was platformed where, and now it's like with the algorithm, you could really get I've opened or done a spot where I go, it's all 22-year-old girls. That's crazy. That there used to be like a UCB show where the challenge was you'd go out and every audience member was a Hasidic man or whatever, and it's like some of us have created that challenge for ourselves, and then that in terms informs the comedy that we make, and you know, if that's what he was doing, that's a jarring choice to make, as opposed to you could look at your audience and go, wow, a lot of people are here for my looks. How do I, and I want to be a great comic. How do I gradually navigate that space? I'll tell you, we're not going to do it in stadium shows.
Sure.
No one's getting better in stadium shows. And so maybe that was an attempt, but like it's such a, that's not going to shift it in one moment. The boys aren't going to see that and go, oh, now I'll check it out. Yeah. And specifically, the people who like really good joke writing aren't going to see that and go, you know,
he's one of
us.
He's a craftsman.
Wow. Now listen, you get a big space of people. Like I do think you can do a big joke about that group, you know, because there can be a rare thing where oh God, I don't even know if I should share this, but I did a college show once where it was like the audience was, I would say, 95% Indian. And there was a moment where, you know, at the end of the college show, I loosen those up a little and do some Q&A. I don't generally end shows in Q&A. But this Indian kid, he asked me, did you get here via the tunnels? And this was during the Chabad or the Jewish Hasidic tunnels or whatever.
Yeah.
And I said to him, what the fuck, did you get here by elephant? And I only felt safe in that context because I was like, I am not in the power here. I am in a room of hundreds of people who are Indian. He made an offensive joke. It's like in that space, I could, and by the way, hacky joke to hacky joke.
Yeah.
But it was like, to me, it was beautiful. I would hope people would understand the context of it. But like in that moment, I was like, I played with the fact that the audience was a particular group of people, that this guy made this comment, and we are in a special space.
Yes.
And by the way, though, didn't clip it.
No. Well,
Didn't clip it.
Exactly, because it removes the space, right? You have a context, and your relationship to this audience is context dependent, and you created a bond, right? You essentially like created the feelings of friendship. You're like, we all know the rules, and we're now playing by the rules, and everyone's like, it makes what that joke out of context would feel offensive or hurtful or who knows. And be like,
Sure.
oh no, it's all safe. We get it. We're all here.
Yeah.
And then you take it out of the context.
I tell my editor, like, do a wide shot of the audience
Yeah.
when we show them. Wide shot.
All audience.
Do a full pan.
How do you think of your audience and your responsibility to it as another person who found an audience?
I think, I think my audience, like, it's definitely very queer. A lot of theater kids, children of divorce, I'm sure. But I would say, like, if I were to like do a stereotype of it, it would be like someone in their early 20s who identifies as neurodivergent and has a cane, and you're not sure if it's for aesthetic purposes. And I love that.
Yeah.
I think my responsibility is like I think my responsibility is to be funny, and I think I have to believe in whatever my own heart is on any certain matter. But there's obviously a feeling where I remember once it was a 19-year-old, and I say I've already fucked it up. It was a 19-year-old, but they said immediately that they had just came out as non-binary. Mm-hmm. And my job as a comedian is to not enter I better be careful. Now, at the same time, I'm not going to go, I'm going to pick on them for being non-binary. I'm going to go, that's not a thing. But I'm going to try to be as brave in my comedic sensibilities as I can. I do think we're in a safe space, and I want to be funny. I don't want to be the same way that someone in a wheelchair goes like, talk to me like a human being. I want to be able to do crowd work with the person in the wheelchair, not go, well, I better like not mention the wheelchair at all. I want to do elevated comedy, so I don't want to do a hacky joke about that. But I want to treat them like a human being, as I would a friend. Mm-hmm. In that moment with the crowd work, I'm saying, hey, let's talk in the way I would talk with a friend, which will be like jokey, maybe a little mean, but I like you.
Yeah.
I'm not here to hurt your feelings. So that to me is the responsibility that I challenge myself when I have that feeling of careful, be careful, don't, and fight that and be a comedian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think you don't want to baby the audience because no one likes that, seemingly. Like, that person came to the show and did not want to be treated like they can't laugh at themselves.
Sure.
And so then it creates this sort of weird expectation where this idea of people are so sensitive these days, which is like bizarre. But people are sensitive, but also like they came to the comedy show for a certain thing, and the audience will jive off of whatever your energy is. So if you're tense about it, so anything you say, they're like, oh, there's a tense in this way said. You build the pressure to it that I think it makes it, especially in the moment, extremely hard to relieve because you're just making it up. But if it's sort of like, we're playing around, I'm going to maybe mess up. And like, actually, that's a lot easier. Like, I'm relieving the pressure you have entering this space by making it easier, not making you the subject of ridicule that we all can laugh at.
Yeah.
Which I think is how certain comedians can only think of it, which is sort of like, oh, I'm doing crowd work, and each person I talk to is an opportunity to turn them as the subject for everyone else to laugh at.
Yes. But I think I've always been, because I grew up in I have a very progressive high school. I grew up in DC. I've always had a more like, be careful, be sensitive, I always remember like an early, I've just been thinking about this so much recently where I did this, a Latin teacher in high school was reading from the Odyssey for an assembly and was quoting Homer or whatever and said like, Odysseus said like, my soul is black with the pain of missing my wife. And a black teacher in the back stood up and said, my soul is black and I am proud. And I remember watching this poor, nerdy white teacher just like suddenly go, and freak out. And like, And this is a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I have the thing in me certainly of I'm gonna be misinterpreted. I'll be in trouble. And I have to fight that side of it. That's the side I have to fight to be a comedian, to be truly funny, and
The part of you that doesn't want to get in trouble.
doesn't want to get in trouble, and couple that with the kind of PTSD that a lot of comedians have from like 2020 of like one tweet and it's over.
Yeah.
And I didn't have those old tweets because I was raised in such a sensitive space. Some of the things I'm like, I would never. That's just the high school I went to trained me early. My parents trained me. Not everyone had that training.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I feel like my comedy is kind of to challenge those safe zones, to trust, to go, listen, it is a risk sometimes. Something out of context could be taken. I have to, if I live in that fear, I'm not going to make good comedy. I have to stand by what I feel in my heart, what I think my life has said, and make good comedy. And I think sometimes there are people. There are trans people with the edgiest sense of humor imaginable. What they might be tired of is that every fucking joke is at the expense of like them being trans. And so I do have audience members come up that go, thank you for like simply the bar is so low.
Yeah.
Thank you for not all your jokes about transness being making fun of trans people. Usually for me, it's making fun of my own social mistakes in lieu of that.
Yeah.
You know?
I think a good example from the special that I want to talk about is this. I don't even know how I would describe it because it is a piece, but they're separated. It's a thing you do, which is about the undocumented immigrants.
Yes.
Which is sort of two pieces. It's a very interesting thing that you do. I'll use interesting because I don't want to. Well, let me rephrase it. So I think a good example of that is sort of the undocumented immigrant stuff that happens in your special. Let's just say stuff because it's not one piece, but kind of becomes a piece. But for those who haven't seen it, can you summarize the gist of both the first part and the second part?
Yeah. Basically, I say I talk about it can be tricky to be a progressive and be a comedian because as like I want to be like I have this thing inside of me. I want everyone to know how progressive I am, and a lot about being progressive, especially in an age of social media, which is text based, and you're putting your thoughts into words, is about using the appropriate language and updated language, so you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and that's not funny. And then I go from there to say like I have a joke that uses the term illegal immigrant. And I've had friends go, hey, you know, that term is hurtful. It implies that a human being is illegal. And so I listen. I do. And I went around the country and I started doing the joke saying undocumented immigrant, and it stopped getting laughs. And I had to go back to them and be like, I'm sorry, progressive friends, unlike you, I have to win the popular vote. And then later, the joke, I use it in part of a bigger chunk that ultimately is, I promise, funnier in context of a younger woman dating my father. My little sister is saying she's a gold digger, and me basically defending gold diggers and saying like they're like illegal immigrants. They're not taking the jobs any of us want to do, and basically they deserve. In this particular case, she deserves a part of my father's will for sucking his dick, presumably. So and in the earlier joke, I mentioned that like I have leftist views, I have to put them in centrist language, and I think like one thing that's so tricky about like appropriate language, and this is not me carte blanche saying all words, is that the moment you say sex worker, you are signaling to everyone, but also especially to an audience that doesn't use that terminology, that just says prostitute, hooker, that you are being appropriate, and that you're aware. And I'm a liberal, capital L. This is who I voted for, and fine, but some people will be turned off right away, And again, that doesn't mean, again, this is a fine line between catering and tricking in an artistic sense.
Yeah.
But I want to not have an audience have a reason to not listen to me right out the gate. And I think my views and my takes and my jokes are more important in that instance than using this particular term. And it's a case by case basis. But I think sometimes things get wrapped up in language in a way where I sometimes worry if you watch a TV show and people put their the pronouns are on the screen, I think about the people that are not even going to watch the show now, that they're going to see that. And again, this is not to say I don't have a firm stance of like, well, then you shouldn't do it. But I think about, God, how many people do you not get to trick? And I say trick in the sense of like, someone will take something in without judging it immediately with their preconceived notions. How often do we do things that block people from that? It's the unfortunate part of where people go, I wish actors would stop talking about politics. And it's like, I don't think that. Do I wish that someone would watch a movie that would shake up their belief system and they won't because Mark Ruffalo's in it? That sucks. And every art form has to determine how they deal with that. But I worry that we create a space where no one's getting the message that we want to. No one's seeing the art that they don't automatically agree with because we up front give them a lot of reasons. And I'm not noble in my stand-up. I say in it, I want to make someone laugh. And I've decided to sacrifice or to use a word that might be repugnant to a degree because A, I want people to laugh, and I do think the view I'm expressing is from someone who is caring or is leftist or has those views. But I want to be clear. My comedy is not, I'm not hitting the road thinking I'm swaying minds. I'm trying to be funny, and I do think who I am will come through that. Yeah. And that's my priorities.
It's also like you do not want the audience to. There's certain words that, I mean, it's like anything which is like eventually as the words become more common, it will become second nature to everyone and no one will snag on it. There's words that we currently use that became second nature that no one uses anymore because, and it's hard to think of it. I mean, like I remember when like African American was introduced and everyone's like, we now say this. And then everyone just started saying it.
But it's tough to control the evolution of language. Like I think there's a desire to, and there's like a frustration where you go, stop saying hooker. And you know, there's a million reasons. There's so many different reasons.
So many. I mean, like we've had like 7 years straight of everyone thinking they invented the unhoused joke.
Yes. And listen, the problem I think with that stuff is there were some people, I'm sure there were some annoying people that have done this show that maybe in a moment, and me too, you know, different things that were like, hey, you should say unhoused. And that was worthy of mockery. I think what the problem is, A of all, comedians generally are on the coast, at least now. Hopefully, as it spreads out, there'll be the comedians that are making fun of Austin who live there. But I think what happened is that comedians in entertainment lived in liberal bubbles, so they thought they were fighting the power, and in fact, they were surrounded by the most annoying people imaginable. And so it became about that, but really, they were not. They were only fighting the power within that bubble, and it's tricky. It's tricky because you do want to make fun of the people you're closest with, but to believe that everyone's saying unhoused is nuts.
Yeah, and add on to they're in a online bubble that's liberal, and then one person tweets at them, they blow it up because they're a comedian and so insecure. Then they talk about it, and they think their jokes are going to return to the bubble that they're in, but that's not how social media works. It breaks through and then becomes they are a mouthpiece for a cause that they don't believe in. And they're essentially like being used and not wanting to be used, or they don't think they are. They think they are in the vanguard or whatever, or they're fighting for free speech or whatever they're thinking. And I think what it gets back to is like, especially in terms of like, it is a comedy show and it's a comedy space, is like you want people not to feel like they need to be right in their answers, right? Like you don't. It's not like you're not posing a question and then the response is like, yes, we agree. It is like we're playing with these things.
Yes.
And that allows you to be wrong or right, but we are evolving together, opposed to I'm telling you all the things you're supposed to say. And even if the comedians who do use the right words are not doing it that way, it's because that's literally how they talk, because they have internalized the language. So many audience members, especially if you're touring, have not internalized that language yet.
Yeah.
So all they hear is like, those are one of those words. And even if they want to aspire to it, they're like, cool, okay.
Yeah.
Let me sit up straight. I'm going to like laugh appropriately at this joke and I'm going to like track the words exactly. And it's just not the freedom that I think hackier comedians are allowing themselves to like paint themselves as being important or interesting because they're just not caring.
Yeah.
But they're not doing good comedy. They're just not caring. So people are like, well, at least I get to not care in this space. And I think the thing is, like, you have a responsibility or you have the potential, which is like people feel tight about certain words or certain ideas, and you loosen them up about it. So it allows them to be more open to hearing perspectives. Regardless if your goal is, like, your goal is not to change their mind, but open them up to not be so tight when the opportunities to change their mind present themselves.
Yeah. And ultimately, like, I can only change someone's mind if someone likes me. I think that's the kind of conundrum of a lot of like comedians who are view first or view forward is like, you've now the only people listening to your work are the people who agree with you entirely. So it's like, and it seems like you're view first in a way where it seems like it matters to you that people are persuaded. So you've defeated your own purpose. And I think the frustration that I'm sure again, I really wasn't touring before COVID, but I'm sure like the frustration some comedians felt when they got in trouble online is like, they were like, you're so mad at me. I tour the whole country and I make people smile and laugh and they love this. And then I come here in the coldness of my laptop and you're telling me that I'm a bad person. And that's kind of the being a comedian, you really get to see America. And now less so now because I go to Alabama and it's you would think Alabama was the gayest city in America, but that's just the room that I'm performing for.
Yeah.
In fact, when I go to conservative cities, that's usually where I go, oh, it seems more like, because this is the hang tonight.
Yeah.
There, horse meat isn't going on right now. There's no other place to go. And I just think that's the perspective that I think some older comedians especially felt such frustration with, that they couldn't express it to the 20-something-year-olds online. They want to say, fuck you. I always remember one moment, I did a gig in North Carolina. It wasn't the first wave of comedians doing shows during COVID where people were mad. It was maybe the third, where some people would have still been annoyed that I had started. But I remember I was doing, and it was in Myrtle Beach, I think that's South Carolina. And I'm used to New York. And someone in the audience member said they worked in technology or whatever. And I said, oh, you must have been busy turning over the election or whatever. In a space in New York, it'd be funny because it'd be like, we know I voted for Biden. And when I did it there, burst into applause. And you have these moments where you go, no. I'm not like you. And it's like the idea that I have to take into account varying audiences. When I go to Europe, I change cilantro to coriander. In the same way, I have to change, and I do.
Yeah.
And I have to do it fast. And I fuck it up sometimes, and they go, what are you talking about? It's same with social mores.
Yeah.
It's
also, it's useful, and maybe some people find this minimizing, but like, especially from your perspective where you're like doing your act, it is kind of just, if you say coriander in England, but in a way where they're like, oh, he changed that today, he just learned, like, they will feel a little bit less connected to you.
I always feel a thing when I'm in, where I go, anyone in college, and I know they say university, I'll go college or university, because if I just say university, I imagine some of them going, you don't say university. And I don't know if that's true, but like, that's how, and that's, I guess, how I feel back to the illegal immigrant, undocumented immigrant, where I'm like, the important thing here is not this individual word, it's the thought I'm expressing. And so I'll change the joke about the coriander and the cilantro. It doesn't matter which one that I say. My point is my girlfriend's annoying.
Yeah.
Like in that particular joke.
Sure.
But it's like, that's how I view it. And I also think like it's not, I'm not going to, if they don't use this terminology, it sounds like I'm correcting them or I'm chastising them. And I think what's more important, I think what's going to get them there sooner, and again, this is not my goal, is for them to appreciate undocumented immigrants as human beings. And then the secondary will follow. I think if I lead with the secondary in my art, they're just never even going to take in the first.
Yeah. I'm curious your thought. There are certain things you talk about or words you use in the special. I mean, not tons.
Now people are like, oh my God.
Yeah, I'll be very specific because when you just say you use words, people they'll just think of all the words.
Sure.
So, and like a lot of comedians now are like, oh, we can say the R word. Now my comedy will be about how I can say the R word.
Yeah.
You talk about suicide in the special. You talk about it at length. Some comedians might be like, oh, we shouldn't do that. There's a sensitive audience. You talk about it at length. You say
paying
gay
the price for
and,
now.
And you say gay. Well, let's get. Well, and you say gay, but you say, to be clear, derogatory in this case.
I say
which is
they're gay, and I mean this in a derogatory way. And I play with it.
Yeah,
I play with the safety or the. Again, like I think back to the R word. I've been thinking about like a lot of this feels post-COVID. I think COVID informed a lot of this. Where sometimes I'm like, you can't say the R word to your friends on your group chat. There are different levels of society that we're supposed to share your shittiness with or your edginess with. And when you don't have friends or when you're so lonely, you go, I have no one to share the fucking shitty thought with. I think I am a generally fine enough person. I wouldn't want you to publish the group chat I have with my best friends. We say crazy shit in there. And we say it in the context of that.
Yeah.
And I think what happens when you have a lack of friends, when you have a male loneliness epidemic, you don't have anyone to say it to, so you need to say it out loud. And when people tell you to shut up, they're telling you don't connect. And it's like no, you don't it's not freedom of speech, it's you're lonely. And we have to have spaces that we share darker thoughts with. And a society where we're lonely, we have to say it out loud. And then we go, well, that's mean. And then freedom of speech, and it's like, no, there's levels of speech. And so in that way, if you watch my comedy, if you're a fan of my work, and certainly if you've watched the special, at that point, I think I've shown who I am, and now you're a little bit more of my friend, and now we can play in a way that feels ticklish because it's like, we can't talk like this, but you're the goal is that you understand me and you feel safe enough to laugh.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think a good example is like you use the C word, but in the context of how gay people use the C word in a certain, and you're talking about drag. It is the parlance of drag. People understand the context of you. Your fans will. I mean, it's possible some people will have no idea who you are, find the middle of your special.
Of course. But again, like that's, you can't live like that. And I do think, you have to take people into consideration, but you can't have them be the determiners of your art.
Yeah. So the suicide, you have a large section about suicide, but now it is on YouTube, and you were talking a little bit about YouTube is not so, you can't just have 10 minutes of suicide discussion.
Well, I think what's wild is like, again, back to the swing of like, there was a time where some of the apps were more censorious in a way that felt like you can't misgender someone, and that's good. And then the powers that be shift, and they go, well, now we're using these tools to say you can misgender one, and you can't say cis. And you go, or suicide. The only post I ever had, like an Instagram story that they took down, it's because it said eating disorder. And it wasn't even a joke. It was like something, it was talking about something. And it was like, you go, this is crazy. And suddenly I'm a free speech warrior. And I'm like, oh, I guess in the new administration, free speech warrior is now a progressive thing.
Yeah.
and they take these big swings, and suicide is certainly one, or talking about self-harm, where it's like, basically, we'll see what occurs or what's able to be done. But as of now, underneath the whole special is a, if you need help, call the suicide hotline, which isn't great to be like, hey, you want to watch this? Help's available. And that's one thing. And then the question is, in the mysteriousness of the algorithm, does it hurt? Is it pinged in some way? You're at the mercy of an unknown thing. And frankly, a lot of these companies, they go, we don't think so. And they don't even know. No idea, it's so complex, and no one person has the answer. And, there's a party that goes, I guess it's good. There's another part of me that goes, people talking about suicide rarely makes me suicidal. You know what makes me suicidal? Nostalgia. Maybe we should create an algorithm that every time a YouTube video makes me think of my childhood, the suicide hotline pops up. And you go, it's like sensitivity mixed in with Silicon Valley, mixed with these massive companies that shouldn't be as big as they are. And we've created I think, a bad system. And look, there was a different time where the people saying, well, they won't let me talk about my view on trans people. And and now I'm talking about, they won't let me talk about, I think euthanasia should be legalized in America. And ultimately, you go, the problem is the internet companies and the world that we've created with technology. But it sucks, and I'm very mad, and I'm mad in a way that I'm sure those guys were mad.
Yeah. How did you decide? Like, it is. I think there's a tendency to be like. I always find it funny when people are like, oh, I like dark jokes, but all they mean is I like making fun of certain groups.
Yes, for sure.
And you're like, what is dark about that joke?
Yeah.
Where I think there's certain comedians who are like, darkness is actually much more varied, and actually the things that are actually scared to talk about, a thing like suicide. How did you think about, like, I want to spend a lot of time on this, partly because of the sort of like titillation of it, I'm sure, but also like, instead of, you could write one little joke about it and then move on. Just as a way of understanding your thought process, how did you think about it?
I think I really, like, when I'm going through a tough situation in life, and it's a coping mechanism, but it's just there, whether it's my dad's heart surgery, or it's, in this particular case, I had a friend who was like really struggling with suicidal thoughts. And like, as it progresses, you deal with problems and frustrations, and you notice things, and it's like, can I find the humor in that? Can I articulate the joke of that? And the challenge of it is, you hear suicide or you talk death at all, people are brought to a place, and it's like, can I have a joke that pops through for a second? And so it's like, I really remember my friends in a very good place, right, as of this recording, and I remember there's one time that they kind of vanished. That you couldn't reach them, and it was scary. And I remember I called them, and they were in a car, and they were like, I fucking hate myself. I don't want to live anymore. Fuck you. They were mad and hung up the phone. And in the moment I thought, maybe they're gonna go do it right now. And I called back, and they turned off their phone or went, and every time I called back, it would be like, hi, it's Alice. I hope you're doing well. Call you right back. And, that moment was terrible. And I don't think I even giggled. But in the moment, I probably was like, Jesus Christ. God, that's insane. Hi, pick up the fucking phone. Hi, Alice, pick up the fucking phone. I'm talking to this old version presentational of happiness. And then it's like, that sticks with you. And I'm sure before I knew they were okay, I'm sure I went into my notes app and wrote suicide voicemail. I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
I'm sure of it.
That's your process. The thing I just realized is this interview also will be dinged on YouTube for the amount we talk.
Perhaps, or the algorithm will miss it because it's an imperfect thing. But I love it. I would love everywhere I go to have a suicide hotline underneath. If you're a fan of Gianmarco, you might. and then even now, it's like you start censoring yourself, and then you don't. And then what you don't talk about suicide is that you don't talk. You just avoid the topic. I can't believe that's a good world.
I do want to also ask about the earlier part of the joke, the joke, which is the how illegal immigrants are like gold diggers like illegal immigrants because this is the job they want to do, which I think is a very good joke and I think a very good point, well crafted. So how do you write jokes?
I really. For a while, I write them down. I mean, I'm writing stuff out. And I think it came from, I started in acting and playwriting. And when I first did stand-up, I just wrote out Word documents. So I write everything out. I'll try to be more looser in the moment. But I have huge Word documents that pretty much have all my jokes in it. So like that dad heart surgery one, which could be viewed as like a chunk. You know, it's a story, really. But it's the kind of stories that I do for stand-up where it's like I write down individual thoughts and little quips of moments and little like premises from my own life. So, you know, my dad dates a younger woman. It's like, well, I'm going to talk about that in some capacity. And later I'll try to – my dad said to me, he said, son, you don't understand. When I date women my age, it reminds me of my mortality. And I go, you know, I ping it in my head. I go – ooh, that first of all, that's what an interesting, what an articulate way to talk about why someone dates younger, and an angle people wouldn't have thought of. So I go, ooh, I want to share that. I want to share that I had to hear this, that I had to deal with this, and I write it down, and I go, okay, I hear that point. What's my counterpoint? And that's when I go back to the laptop and I like think, or it sits there and I look at it and I go, fuck, I don't have a joke. And maybe if I'm brave enough, I go on stage and I do some, well, seeing yours reminds me that you're a fucking creep. Or it used to be, well, when I see your girl, it reminds me of Law and Order SVU. That was the joke. And it did fine. And then it's like, oh, that's not quite it. And then it eventually reminds me of Jeffrey Epstein, which is a fine enough joke. It could go deeper, but that was a joke and I had it and I would perform it. And then as I was building out my dad's heart material, it was like I needed to capture how young this woman was and how it made me feel. And so then I look at my Word document and I start stacking the jokes on top of each other and I eventually create a narrative and connect them. You know, same with I remember the suicide chunk, there used to be jokes that were just one-liners. And I remember when I first started dating my girlfriend, who's just very smart and sees comedy from a different way, she was like, I was like, I love these jokes. She's like, yeah, but it's just 5 suicide jokes in a row. And it took a long time to get to a point where eventually something happened that housed those jokes and I rewrote them to reintegrate them. And sometimes you could go, you didn't quite seam it together into a full outfit. But when it's successful, it's, you know, it's a bigger piece of art.
So I want to create some context for this, and which is for you personally, which is sort of the story you have told is like you started out as an actor, you made a lot of money in an ad campaign, and you invested that money into a sketch series, which is your first attempt to like.
God, it feels so good to hear Vulture talk about my sketch series. I wanted so much for that series,
and it did not work. It was. You did it exactly at a time where like sketch series were, you know, like that was maybe a version of the internet's viral. You did it at a time where that was not necessarily happening. And it did not work. But what I'm curious about that entire thing, which is like some people would make a lot of money and be like, I'm going to use this money to live a lavish life or save it or something. But it was interesting, which is like, I make this money, it should go into the business. So tell me about that instinct of yours, which is like funding the business, because I think what is interesting about you is like you've created a team before a lot of comedians of your level would create a team. Like
sure,
You had a publicists on retainer.
Yeah,
When
yeah,
like
yeah.
I know comedians with multiple stand-up specials
Sure,
who have
sure.
a publicist for a couple months. Now,
Yeah.
publicists do not like that, but that's what they do. So I'm curious about that instinct of like, I think you once you described like I'm a creative director and the product is Gianmarco. Now, obviously you're also a comedian, but I'm curious about the creative director side of yourself.
Yeah, I think it's like twofold. Like my dad's never worked for anyone, always had his own company and a workaholic, and so that definitely is in my DNA. And then like I think what I took from acting was how pathetic the existence was of waiting for everything. And I really gave acting my all. I mean, there was a time I wanted to be the greatest musical theater performer of all time. And then I wanted to be Daniel Day-Lewis or whatever. And I wasn't even thinking through like, do I want to do I remember seeing Death of a Salesman with Philip Seymour Hoffman. I was like, even if I could do that, I don't know if I'd want to do that 8 times a week. And I didn't start stand up until I was 26-ish, and I had fully with all my effort tried to make it in acting, and I felt the patheticness of asking casting directors like to please bring me in, of just sitting around taking workshops, no one giving a shit about you, having zero power. And then seeing other people, whether they're more talented than you or often just hot, just kind of complain about pilot season, and you're like, I've never even gotten an audition. That I think it really created me. And once I saw like, oh, I can do it. The moment I saw that I could really control my own destiny, I was like, I will do it 100%, and I will. I made kind of a conscious choice to exist as if I would never get a booking ever again, that it all was going to be myself. And then once you feel it, once you get the feedback of, once you traveling to another city they've never been to, and having 10 people who you've never met pay money to like watch you, and they knew who you were, you go like, you start seeing the tangibility in a way that you so don't get as an actor. And I just I wanted to grow. I wanted to I wanted my jokes to get out there. I have a look at me since I was like a child. And so it was important for me to reinvest in myself at every possible way. And then, the more social media came, I remember when I would caption my own TikTok videos, and I mean, this was during COVID. It was a rare time where I had nothing else to do, but instead of reading, instead of learning to cook, I was typing out, making it so there's no overlap, doing this on your phone, slight here, slight there. It was awful. And just the more things came, the more I was like, I need help here. It's more worth, and I always had a fear of, am I going to become a bad stand-up comedian because I'm worrying about all this other stuff? And my priority is always just to be a fucking great comic. And so I outsource and I built, and I'm constantly building. I hired my second full-time employee like this past month, and I'm proud of the thing that I'm building.
Second full-time employee. So
assistant, full-time assistant.
So how many people are in your team? And if you're willing to share, how much money do you feel like you pay in salaries?
I mean, I couldn't even tell you, which is my own shortcoming. I have a business manager too.
Of course.
I'll tell you, I have a business manager, I have a full-time assistant, I now have a full-time social media person, but they work in tandem with a social media company. My openers also do editing. I have a podcast producer. I have various editors. I would say, I mean, God, I truly. It wouldn't be absurd to think that my monthly overhead is at least $20,000. At least. And I probably make most of that back via the YouTube. And it probably is higher than that. It probably is high. And I want the freedom to also be able to write obsessively, and I always feel like I don't have enough time to write, but I want to build, and the world is my oyster, and I want to be able to perform internationally, and I want to live a career that I can happily say no to the Saudi Arabia Comedy Festival when they offer me $350,000. I wasn't offered, to be clear. I'm hoping this podcast gets me on, but I want autonomy.
Yeah.
I want autonomy, and I hope other things come my way. But I've lived enough life where I've seen they haven't, and I've watched the George Carlin documentary where ticket sales slumped, and he had to go do the kids show, or he was nervous, and I go, fuck that, George Carlin, George Carlin. Well, I want to create a base where I have some level of security.
Let's talk about crowd work.
Sure.
So the calculation I believe you made, which is the calculation I believe everyone made, which is like, well, I want to post clips and I don't want to burn material on the basic level of just sort of like, it's good to sort of put yourself out there. If you do material, you'll have no material to then perform at. And also, I imagine you saw it kind of working. You're fairly early on it, but I believe like there was Andrew Schultz did really early, and then there was that guy, I always forget his name, but like the guy who did the like see heckler destroys whatever that whatever that person's name is. But anyway, people were doing it.
Steve Hofstetter.
Yes,
Yeah.
that guy. I always forget his name.
You should put he forged the path.
I know. I just literally I should have. I know his name is important because he's this guy who. I wonder how he feels about it now that people did it to them. Like,
You should have him on.
maybe I will.
You should absolutely. Steve navigated the internet way before any of us did. His perspective would be interesting.
So, how did you think to do it? How did you approach it? How did you want to make it so you felt happy with the result of it? Were you doing much crowd work before it? Tell me your sort of journey to it.
I never was like a crowd work person early on because I was never good at talking to strangers. You know, it was very scary. And then I hosted at LOL Comedy Club, a very shitty club that doesn't exist anymore in Times Square. And first I was doing check spots for a long time, and then hosting you could get paid.
Check spots are when they drop the check at some comedy clubs, they have comedians go on to essentially bomb because no one's paying attention. They're doing the math.
Yeah,
Probably
yeah.
fine.
They need to put some degree of entertainment, but no one wants to do it because the audience suddenly is in a very bad mood, especially if it's a bad club. They're looking down at the check, looking up at you, going, "This is not worth it."
Yeah.
So when I started hosting there, like, you could not just launch into material, or at least in New York, that's not what they did. Sometimes you go on the road, you'd be like, "Oh, other places hosts just go right into their set, and it's just cold and weird for a bit." So at LOL, like, I just had to. I was doing crowd work to just get in there. It was so rough in the beginning, and some of the shows were so colder, so loud, people so talky, and that was really on its own. That was like for that, and then I don't really know whose crowd work clips I like first saw on the internet, because it wasn't Andrew Schultz. I feel like his era was before I was even looking at like the social media stuff, but I think I did a lot of front-facing camera jokes during COVID, and I just had a wealth of jokes that I could just burn off one after the other. And then
The pedophile joke you have.
the pedophile joke
Went very viral.
went very viral. But like, basically, there were just like a couple shows where an audience member would know the punchline. And usually there were people like in support, like, but you'd see the mouth. Or one time there was like a show where someone was really drunk and she was like saying them with me. And I was like, and that was when the shift was, where I was like, okay, I'm now having enough followers that I can't share my material this carte blanche. So then I was like, what else do I do? And I started like trying to turn roast jokes into it. It didn't fully work. It's a tough one to do. Some people are trying it a little bit better now. And then eventually I explored the crowd work, and it worked. And it didn't feel like a conscious decision to start doing more crowd work, but I just was like, I need to film every show. And then the videos started clicking, and I said, I need to put out more. I felt like I need to put out something every day. That was kind of especially during COVID, that was the mentality, once a day. And so then I started doing just more, and filmed it, cut it up. And then I tried to make it personal. I think in the beginning, like, it was about divorce. I had like jokes that were like, how old are you when your parents got divorced? Whatever I just said, so it was your fault. And then from there it would expand, and I just liked it. I never do the same show. I never really like have an hour that I'm running unless I'm about to film something. So it was like fun. It made the shows more spontaneous. I enjoyed it, and now it's just something. Sometimes I do shows where it doesn't happen, and then other times there's more than not. But no one comes to the show and thinks. No one comes to my shows and thinks that was too much crowd work. Social media, that's anyone's ball game, depending on how they digest it. No one comes to my stand-up shows and is ever going to say. I remember when I did not a charity gig, quite the opposite, a private club gig, and I was like a feature, and the headliner was doing all crowd work. And this was before the whole conversation. He was killing, and I remember going to the bathroom though, and someone was leaving. I was like, I wish he'd stop talking to the audience. And I remember that moment of like the disgruntled person who, even though like I was killing, was like, I wanted to see comedy, and so I'm not good enough, or crowd work's not consistent enough. I've never done an all crowd work show, and frankly, the proposition frightens me. Because it doesn't always work. So yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever have the opposite of audience members coming and being like, crowd work me, let's do some crowd work. Like, stop doing your act. They're interrupting.
No, that always seems to be like the fear that people have that we're like poisoning the well.
Yeah.
No. I get a lot of messages before a show saying, it's my brother's birthday. Can you make sure to like roast the hell out of him? And I ignore it unless something was incredibly interesting. But no, there hasn't been like heckles of it because I control my shows. I think like the idea that like crowds are going to be ruined because of it. I run my show. I come out, and if I showed weakness or I like was a little bit loose, but the moment I start, like I'm doing what I'm going to do. Do I have hecklers now and then? Sure. Hecklers have always existed. But I find my opinion when it comes to crowd work is like I go for my own shows. Part of me is like, for my own shows, I'll do whatever the fuck I want for my own shows, and I'm accountable to my audience. For showcases at clubs, I do think crowd work is rude. I think, that being said, if a moment occurs that's spectacular, but I think to and this is on the club to maintain too. If there's a club where it's known this is a crowd work place, but I do think like the tradition of the stand-up comedy club is you are going there to see written material, and the moment someone starts doing a lot of crowd work, it changes the audience. This is why I do think it's fair for a headliner to tell their opener like, don't do too much crowd work because then you're purposely training them in the moment to expect something else. I remember I did a show at Broadway Comedy Club where a comedian went into the audience before me, and terrible show too, but like when the audience was like doing all sorts of bits to them, and I'm like, maybe it was this is the next Andy Kaufman. All I know is that to me, the comedian next, I'm like, fuck you, that's rude. I came on here on the premise of what we were doing was stand-up comedy. I don't think what you did is strictly stand-up comedy. And now the audience feels kind of disastrous, and now I feel like a cornball. And maybe if I was a good enough comedian, I could get them back. But that's what I think about crowd work at showcases. I think it's generally rude to the other comedians. And that I do understand. And if you're using showcase shows to farm for clips, that I understand.
I will say the crowd work wars are over. I feel like they were more of a thing of last year, 2003, 2004. I think people were much more likely to have disagreements about it. And there's all to transition to, but there's all to say what would happen, it felt like some comedians would complain about crowd work on their social media, and then other comedians would defend doing crowd work, but there were not many debates in public about it. What did you feel like when peers would be like, crowd work, it sucks, or whatever the hell they said?
Yeah, it was tough because Jay Jordan is my friend.
Yeah, that was the example I thought.
No, I just think like we have different perspectives over like I don't think it's my responsibility, the state of stand-up comedy, nor do I think I have like the power over it. I think like the algorithm determines a lot of this. Listen, if all my crowd work clips fucking tanked, or if they didn't work in the room, or I felt like it was losing the show, I drop it. Do I think a lot of bad comedians have been able to make a lot of content that still like does well enough, and then they get careers off it, and then they occupy the comedy clubs, and then they get booked for the Netflix specials? Yeah, I think that sucks. But I would say that my crowd work is better than plenty of bad comedians' prepared material. I think there's bad stand-up and there's bad crowd work. And the algorithm, I would argue this, is that the algorithm it prioritizes, you can get away with bad crowd work on the algorithm more than you can with bad stand-up, and that has created a bad incentive structure. And coupled with clubs, streaming venues, publications relying less on their own individual gatekeepers and talent makers to rely on just who's getting the most views, then the algorithm is starting to make the cream not rising to the top. It's quite some shit is being funneled there as well. That's a problem. Do I think that means crowd work is bad or inherently wrong? No. Do I think if you create a culture of kind of shaming around crowd work or seeing it as lesser than, maybe you'll discourage people from posting as much? Perhaps. Even though sometimes the conversation does bother me where it's like as if crowd work is bad or it means you don't have material, I try to say to myself, Gianmarco, are you proud of your crowd work? Do you think what you're doing is good? Do you still provide stand-up? And I'd say yes. And I try to not let it get to me, because I know maybe you do need to create a shame around it. So, because if you don't, people go up to showcase shows and start asking people what you do for work in the middle of the showcase shows. Maybe. But it's like the same where people go, improv sucks. And I go, that's a whole art form you're talking about. That's a childish view.
I think my main critique...
And I don't think Jay Jordan would say, you know, he says his own way. I don't think he would ever go like, crowd work in and of itself is bad or dumb.
Yeah, I think his critique might be similar to mine, and I'll try to explain my sort of evolution on it, which was I didn't never loved crowd work pre the internet version of it, but like I liked when it felt like it was surprising and it can go in weird directions and felt like a longer experience and like a live phenomenon of like the audience connecting to each other in this sort of weird thing where the comedian and the audience are together. And I got concerned, or I bristle at when it feels like the live space, which I find to be sacred, is treated as a content creation space.
Sure. I don't disagree with that.
But I think ultimately I've now realized like I am old and I don't like the internet as much as younger people I think are just more comfortable with the sort of fusion of the content creation space and the live space than I am. And I think that when I see it now, I'm like, they're fusing of a reality more than
but there also is the reality of like, well, does the live show matter at all? Like I remember early on when I was like new, getting clips occasionally from crowd work. And I think I was in North Carolina and I was talking to this audience member and it was just a great conversation. And it's like you're surfing and you're like, I'm still up here. up here. And I remember then having the anxious thought of like, did the camera run out of batteries? And suddenly in that moment, if that camera didn't exist, the audience would maybe be getting a little bit of a better show, or I wouldn't have had that thought. I'd be more focused, whatever. And in that sense, I go like, that has added something. I'm sure that sometimes I keep a crowd work moment going a little bit longer because I'm waiting for like a final button. I'm not in my brain. I don't go, I need to get the 6-minute clip.
Yeah.
But I know sometimes I'm like, let's keep going. Let's keep going because I think this is like a big thing. Does that divide my attention a little bit? Sure. I And are there comedians out there that divides it so much that the show's not good? Yes. And that's just the balance you have to figure. But I do agree in the sense of like, I haven't done a show that hasn't been filmed in forever. And sometimes I make it that because then it lets me think of it less. I just go, it's all being filmed all the time. And I wanted to put that thought to the side. But of course, there can be a fear. And I think, again, when you see the comedian doing showcase shows and they're doing crowd work, you go, oh, you're just doing this for the camera. But again, that's like all art is going to struggle with the world that it exists in the context. You get stressed if the booker's in the comedy club. There's other things that can distract you. This is just a new one.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that's the thing that I've come to realize, which is you were operating as a creator when I thought comedians and creators were these different things, or I thought artists and creators were these different things, or artists and influencers were these different things. And that is partly because my relationship to the internet and how I came at it, I had a time period where there were artists and creators were a new thing. And then ultimately it seems like audiences do not delineate as strictly as I do. And they do expect a lot of the comedians they follow to operate in the world of producing content. And they aren't as bummed out about the thing that you might say. Or maybe they are. Maybe they'll come to it where it's like actually want, like in so much as high schools now have no phones, and obviously there's currently the no phones version of comedy means like I want to be able to say slurs and no, but like I can't imagine a
or
future
there's
where
a no
like,
phone version of the naked roast battle. Like you can create a space like and maybe people will be thrilled by it. Maybe there will as we all become numb because of phones. The same way my girlfriend and I would go like, let's go to dinner, as if we're like fucking revolutionary thinkers. Let's go to dinner and leave our phones at home. And it's like, but yeah, it's like maybe people will do that. But also like, again, when you're seeing a comedian, you're seeing them like with their circumstances. I have Tonight Show set. So every stand-up show I'm opening or putting that Tonight Show set, halfway through that set, do you think sometimes I go, I don't think the audience is really feeling this. I could pivot and give them a better show. I'm running this.
Yeah.
You're dealing with. You want to see something more strict? Go see a play. Go see a musical. I mean, truly, this is an art form that's very individual based.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it, and sometimes the conflict of it.
And it's very reactive to the moment, and the moment is technology, where it's like a musical written 70 years ago. I mean, the staging could be slightly different, but ultimately it is like the script is the script. When I started covering comedy, it was still, the goal was, I need to get a set on Comedy Central, which then will give me a half-hour special on Comedy Central. Will then give me an hour on Comedy Central, and then I will have a development deal at Comedy Central, and then I'm Amy Schumer, right? Or what I do. And we're now talking at a time where Comedy Central is just a network for reruns of The Daily Show and South Park, I believe, at this point. And I don't know if maybe they... if you were to talk to a comedian starting out now, like how would you explain what the path is, how they should think about forging a career post Gatekeeper?
I mean, I would say, I remember once hearing Mike Birbiglia say something where people would ask him that, and he was like, he did colleges and had a truck or whatever, and he was like, and I think the self-aware thing to say is like, what I did doesn't exist anymore. What do I do? Wait for a global pandemic and make sure you get on whatever the new app is as soon as you can. It's so specific. I certainly like have advice. Like my openers, they when they figure out their content or their show or their special, I always have like advice. I think but starting out, my God, I don't know. I have advice for how to be a good stand-up and how to like fine-tune and the challenges of it. And I have advice about how to like create a brand online and maybe get a following and find what works. The intersection of those two things is something I grapple with every day. So starting out is tough because there's so many fucking comedians now. And I think the only thing that I tell the people I know, there's a comedian, Yvette, her last name's escaping me now, but we were talking about it, and I said, you're making a lot of stuff. And it's good. I did her podcast, and she makes videos, brilliant sketches, better than I could have ever made at that age. and she was saying, I said, do you want to be a great stand-up? And she goes, yeah. And I go, it's gonna be really hard with all the other things that you're doing. I had years where I was at LOL doing 4 shows a night, and then during the holidays, 6 shows on the weekend. Holidays, there were sometimes 8 shows. It was a miserable existence. I said, are you dating someone? Because I was single at the time, and that's all I did, and I didn't even date. And I go, do you have time to go do the roast battles, which I always recommend for joke writing purposes? It's so hard and takes so much focus to be a great stand-up comedian, and this is where the joke writing comes in, and like where aside from all the social media stuff that I've talked to and battled with, there was a time where I was not, where at LOL all I was doing was trying to get through that show. And there's so many comedians that are having to do both these things at the same time, and I think that is disastrous for artistic development. But it's so hard. So I just said to her, I said, like, if you want to be a great comic and you're doing all this other shit, my only advice is get a therapist, because your life is going to be fucking miserable. If you don't care about being a great comic and you just want to succeed in comedy, I'm not as interested to even give that advice. I go, well, go do that. And do I think you should be headlining one of the great comedy clubs? Do I think it contributes to the deterioration of the art form? Sure. And maybe that stuff is dead. Maybe a lot of the club circuit is dead. And we have to reforge, and people go, these comedy clubs all suck. And you go to the new one that's called the We Don't Film Club. That's the evolution of art. I'm not in control of that. I'm only in control of my own artistic output. But to those younger people, I would say, like, you do have to cut out the noise and focus on stand-up. And if you're going to try to do everything, get ready to have no other free time. No one's doing, in my opinion, almost everyone that I see that's starting out stand-up, I go, you're not doing enough stand-up. And I don't know where you could be doing more stand-up, because what I had, LOL was brutal, and I wasn't paid for 2 years. And there's, but I got more stage time than I could get now if I tried with where I'm at. And that's, good luck.
Have you had older comedians come to you and being like, how do I do it? How do I do the Gianmarco thing?
No, I think comedy is definitely such an ego-based thing. It's tough to ask for help.
Well, I hope they listen to this.
Sure.
Conversation.
I think what I feel about with those older comedians is I feel like they hire these social media companies hoping they'll take care of it. And I want to say, like, I wish I could explain to you how bad a job that they're doing. What a generic thing they're doing. I mean, like, there's older comedians, and now I'm like, well, now I'm kind of entering their ranks. I no longer can view them as differently. But there's older comedians when it was happening or wanted to be like, you filmed 5 specials. You have some money. Spend absurd money to have someone cut up this special and build up, like, you have all this footage. I go footage. I will have someone comb through this podcast after whatever clips you put up. And in the past, I would have selected them, but they will come through and they will pull more clips, and we'll wait a polite amount of time so you don't go, hey, it could be a year from now. And then we'll post it 2 years from now if one of those goes viral. If you have the footage, fucking post it.
So in that context, what does a special mean at this point?
It's hard to differentiate. I asked, Tova, and I talked to my team, and I'm like, do I not post for a month to make it feel more special? Does it give a shit? I think it's like, in a way, it's over. The idea of the special that launches, it just doesn't exist anymore. No one's that focused. And Tova says something interesting to me about, like, the ability where she knew her favorite Kumail joke and could almost lip sync it, do a karaoke version of it. And now we put out so much stuff that, like, what's the version of that? The R. Kelly joke that went so viral so many different times that maybe that joke, someone could, like, beat for beat do it. At the same time, I want it to be special. And so, it's higher quality. I poured over the editing, the writing. My only hope is that I've written it well enough and that it's long enough that it feels different than the normal fare of what you're getting. At the same time, I already have the clips made, captioned, thought out, and I had one chunk about talking about people equating anti-Semitism with criticizing Israel that was filmed not that great from too far away. The outfit wasn't great in a Vancouver show. It felt like I need to put this up now. It's not going to make it in time right now. I put it up, and I bet if we were able to calculate, it's the second most viewed thing I've done. Could I bemoan that I didn't get to fine-tune it even more, have it beautifully shot from 3 different angles? Sure. That's longing for a past that no longer exists. I have to just feel good that that thought and that joke was seen and that people liked it. And I'll never have what Mulaney had, and Mulaney will never have what George Carlin had, and hosts will never have what Johnny Carson had. You can't spend your life whining over this shit. You can feel pain now and then. I did want to be that. I did want to have an hour.
Yeah.
That was the best fucking hour. It's fine.
So now it's time for our final segment. It's called
Sure.
the Laughening Round. It's like a lightning round, but because it's a comedy podcast, I call it the Laughening Round. Do you have a favorite joke? Street joke? Speaking of these things.
Yeah, I like street jokes. Can I tell you one? Can I tell you one that I like? I did a joke and then I found out it was a street joke, and I probably took the DNA. It was it was about siblings get to call each other whatever they want because they know you, but you got to be careful in public if it's a half sibling because you don't look the same necessarily. And so the joke was like, I went with my little half sister. We went to get salad. She asked the guy made the salad for 4 pieces of bread, and I was like, bitch. And the guy made the salad, said, excuse me, what did you just call the young lady? And I was like, no, she's my sister. And he was like, well, then you tell that C word, it's extra.
Yeah.
Now, I was then listening, for to Gilbert Gottfried, one of his albums where he's just doing street jokes, and I've now seen it in joke books, which I love joke books, and it's like some guy goes to the bank, a woman bank teller says, "Bitch, let me speak to the manager," and she's like, "Excuse me, what'd you say?" I said, "Bitch, let me speak to the manager," and it goes back again and again.
Yeah.
And he's calling her a bitch, and then she gets the manager. And he goes, what's the problem out here? And he says, I've been telling this bitch I need to deposit $1 million into the bank. And he said, and was this C word giving you a tough time? and I remember I heard it, I was like, oh my God. Yeah. And in a way, per our earlier conversation about and by the way, that half sibling joke was one that felt like an earlier era of my stand-up, where the integration of jokes into more personal or storytelling jokes. I still think it's a good, in a way I'm like, I could toot my own horn and go, look how I changed it. I made it about sibling dynamics. The observation of having a half sibling and you talk to them like a sibling, but you're not immediately physically recognizable as siblings is interesting. That's an interesting perspective.
Yes.
And then I took that perspective, and then the DNA of bitch, I mean, literally B word, C word, BBC, and inserting it into this perspective, it's like it was my personal perspective mixed with the bones of a traditional joke, and then I would say stage 3 is what you see.
Yeah.
But per my metaphor about the flower earlier that you didn't like, it was built of stage A.
Yeah. There's a joke you wish you could steal? Another comedian's joke that you wish you could
Yeah, I mean, I'm obsessed with openers. When you headline and the audience knows you, the pressure of an opener is kind of lost. But comedy club opening, when they don't know who you are, brilliant. And Daniel Simonson posted one recently where he has some shirt that's red up to here and then the rest is brown. And his first line is so I've been trying to wear less red. And I saw him do it, and what's so beautiful about those jokes is they are often looks based.
Yeah.
And I go, think of it mathematically, your appearance is the setup, and now all you need to say is the punchline, and it's extra surprising because you get to start with a punchline, and so the audience is expecting a setup deep down in your bones, and little do they know they've already seen the setup.
Yeah.
That one. Louis Anderson. Let me move this mic stand out of the way so you can see me. There's a comedian named Chris Crespo, and his arms aren't fully formed, and so it takes him a long time to get the mic. It takes a long time, and little do you know, that's the setup. And I think his punchline, and I don't know if this was a long time ago, he's like, "Don't worry, I put my pants on like you guys 8 hours at a time." and to me, I'm like, all those jokes. The irony is like, those are all things that I'm not, and I look at it, but it's like that's what they had. They got to walk on there, and do,
Yeah, my favorite that I always forget, and it's like a 25-year-old joke, but when Jim Norton would come on stage at this Comedy Cellar when I was younger, the audience, who knows why, did not applaud him like a normal comedian. And he just goes on stage and goes, "You guys are looking at me like I beat kiddie porn charges on a technicality." And then immediately sets you up for like everything that is Jim Norton.
Yeah.
And the setup is the fact that audiences naturally do not respond to him, and he then figured out how to use that energy to
and ultimately there looks like jokes. Like I think you would criticize younger comics for being like, "I know what you're thinking, I look like a blah 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 blah," and the truth is, again, like you could look at that and go like, looks like jokes are hacky, corny, cheap, but I go, what are you talking about? You're telling me that what people's eyes see, that you can't comment on that? Like that's the first thing you're showing them.
Yeah.
Play with it.
Yeah, that's the context the room is now in. That's a shared reality you have. Yeah. Might as well acknowledge it. Do you have a short story of an interaction with a legendary comedian, living or dead, you are willing to share?
Yeah, so when I was at LOL, Bill Burr stopped by when the manager wasn't there, or the owner wasn't there, and so there was a floor manager. And I stand by this woman. She's running the world's worst restaurant in the entire world that happens to have comedians going on stage. And Bill Burr, I don't think this would have mattered, but he had the big mustache because this was around the era of him filming King of Staten Island. And he goes in there, he goes, "I'd love to go up." And she goes, "I can give you the email if you want to send a tape to the manager." And he goes, "Wait, I sold out Madison Square Garden just like last week." And she goes, "Okay, buddy." And essentially leaves.
Yeah.
And I wasn't there for that. I came like later that day. And I remember Usama Siddiqui was like fuming in the corner. I was like, "What's wrong?" And he was like, "They turned away Bill Burr." And so then I think the next night, Bill Burr, I guess, talked about it on his podcast. And I saw him, I was hosting at West Side Comedy Club, rest in peace in my heart. And Bill Burr was there. He would swing by, and I was hosting. And I to the side, I said to him, I was like, "Hey, I work at LOL. We were all so mad. It was just like, it was crazy. Bill Burr." And he was like, "Okay." And turned away. And I was like, "Oh, I really thought I had an in here for a good social interaction." And he was probably getting ready for something, but I just like poured my heart out to him. Like, "We loved you so much." You're like, "Okay."
What's something that people think is comedy that you think is not comedy?
Politics. I think like, I think when people say, and everyone says it in some capacity, they go, "Trump is funny." I want to be like, that's fine. That's fine. Are you a dog? You need to control yourself. You need to control yourself. To me, it's like every time you saw someone with big tits, you had to be like, "Look at the knockers on those." And it's like, okay, that's the dentist though. Like we're here for a reason. And the fact that someone's funny, you don't deny funny. I think one of the stupidest things that liberals did, and Republicans, everyone does it in their own capacity, where they go, "That's not funny." It's not that it's not funny. It's that something else is more important now, and the funniness, or like leaning into the funny, or like joking about, or like enjoying it, reveling in it, is taking away from a very serious thing. And this is like, it feels lame to say, and you don't want to be the person. I'm not saying go like, don't go up to people and be like, "Hey, it doesn't matter that it's funny," but it's like every individual has to go like, if you said to someone, "Hey, I need a cardiologist. Do you have one?" And you're like, "Oh, I got this guy. He's hilarious." You would go, "Oh, do you have one that's good though?" And I think that's the kind of social way we need to look at. I see these debates, And, whenever someone gets a good roast joke in, whether it be Trump or Biden or Hillary at the time, it would be like, oh, and you'd be like, oh, fuck, he got her. God, no, no, no. And it's like, that's insane. And we have lost the plot. And so don't deny funny, but you can go, it doesn't matter that it's funny. And to even talk about the funny is, again, like talking about the cardiologist's tits. It's like, we are here for a reason. We're about to go into surgery. So we need to talk. We need to bring seriousness to things and not be manipulated by this. Comedy, bad people can be hilarious. And I think the dumbest fucking thing people do is when someone has bad views, they go, they're not talented or whatever. And then it instills a bunch of like the amount of people who had to like go like Louis C.K. was like never funny as like some moral stance. And then a bunch of people were like, I agree with your moral position, but like, you want me to lie right now? You want me to lie right now? I remember the day someone said to me once, they said, who's the funniest comedian alive? And I do with the thing where we go, it's Louis C.K. And it was like, well, I think makes someone not funny. And I wanted to say, I don't think that makes someone not funny. I think it makes them something else, but they can still be funny. And it's not even like you need to separate the art from the artist or you have to enjoy the art. But don't tell me the art wasn't good, because then you're lying. It's like you wouldn't tell someone eating McDonald's fries. You can tell them like, hey, this is harmful if you do this all the time, and here's some other alternatives. But if you tell people like, those fries aren't good, they're going to grow resentful. They're going to the same way you snuck in the album you wanted to listen to, they're going to sneak the fries, and then you're not going to be living in a real world. And then when enough people are eating fries, they go, hey, I went online, a lot of people are eating fries. Maybe fries can win the popular vote.
Do you have a Mount Rushmore of comedians?
I do in my mind, and the problem is every time I say it, it's a bunch of straight white men. and again, there's this mix of like, that's not to say I don't have comedians that aren't straight white men. And actually, by the way, Chappelle would be, a version. The problem is all these have aged badly. Chappelle's Killing Me Softly was brilliant. Louis C.K. as the most incredible library of all time. Jeselnik changed the way I view jokes, and it changed me in a deeper way. And then John Mulaney is like the most brutal, pure stand-up talent. He has just moments that I think are so brilliant. And there's more and there's more. I'll tell you what it's not, though. It's not George Carlin and it's not Richard Pryor. The time we have moved past that. Anyone who says that is putting on a fucking face. A lot of these edgelord comedians who are like George Carlin. George Carlin would hate you. George Carlin wouldn't have Trump on the pod.
Do you have a joke that never worked, but you'll go to your grave being like, I was right there wrong?
I honestly think I kept it in the special because it was part of the suicide chunk, and I never got the wording right where it was like where my friend asked me like why it's not being able to know how to tell someone why not to kill themselves, and being like, I don't know if I have a good argument given your life circumstances and the world, and being like, God said you can't. And my hope was, the idea was, there's the second part where it's like, maybe the reason we need hell is because you need to believe there's something worse than staying alive. And the joke of it never superseded the tragic nature of the thought.
Yeah.
And sometimes with those, I go, you know what? I'll prioritize the thought over the comedy. And I'll get back to the comedy. But I'm going to allow myself less of a laugh on this one because I just thought it was a smart thought I had.
Last one. What was the best time you ever bombed?
I did a gig that, like, if the right person had talked to me, it could have been the end of my stand-up career. Was you mean like a bad bomb?
Yeah, but in some way, there's a gloriousness.
Yes. To it. It was I think year one, I got hired to do hired through a family friend, like just recommended. And it was someone's second marriage bachelor party. I was getting paid $600, which at the time was I was being paid nothing at LOL, so it was everything. And I prepped the fuck out of it. Matt Marin and I asked Matt Marin, who ran Comedy Fight Club, to like write some jokes. I wrote some jokes. We like met. I met with their son. I got information. I got the person's Instagram, and they were like in their 50s. And I had all these note cards. I got a suit from H&M. I thought it'd be like Friars Club. And I went back there. It was like a back room of a steakhouse. It was just a dinner with the boys.
Yeah.
And there was nowhere for me to perform. It was a round table. And we had to wait for the steaks to come out. So I'm just standing there kind of awkwardly, sitting on a side chair. They said, "You want anything to drink?" I asked for a glass of Merlot. And they said, "Oh, you drinking wine, you pussy?" They said, "You want a straw for that, you pussy?" And I proceeded. I was supposed to do 30 minutes and roast jokes. I mean, 30 minutes of roast jokes. It's a crazy ask. I would never say yes to that now. So I was going to do I was going to do the roast and then go into my stand-up and with some roast jokes. And I joked about the guy. He was a little heavy set, but I did a bunch of fat jokes. And at some point, 2 minutes in, he was like, "Okay, enough with the fat jokes." And I'm scrolling through my cards and I'm like, that's going to be a problem. And then I did one about like, let's call him Larry. Larry, everyone says you like eating out. Well, everyone except for Donna. And he goes, hey, her son's right there. And I was like, holy shit. And then I had to pivot into, I went to college for musical theater material. And my like super personal material where you go, God, someone get me a joke book right now. By the way, when you go, this is when you need some jokes that are not attached to the circumstances.
Yeah, 100%.
And then I think like at some point, I said, and some of these jokes were good. I said, Donna always dresses up to the 9s to make up for the fact that she's a 6. And then one of his guys, this is a good joke. And then one of his guys said, he said, no, she's a 2, a size 2, that is. And Gary was like, yes, we should have hired, they said, we should have hired you instead. Ha 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 ha. And I was like, you wanted me to compliment your fucking fiance? Are you serious? And they could have rightfully not paid me, but they did give me the $600. But it was so, to be stuck in that position and for 30 minutes feel this thing of like, they want this to end. I want this to end. And for some reason, we have to keep this going because of a contract that doesn't exist. And it was one of those moments I called everyone I knew after because I just needed to like share. And it was so mortifying because it felt like not only am I not funny, but I'm forcing people to listen to me. And the right words, I could have gone back to acting right then and there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.